Not only do you have something cool, you've figured out a really cool way to sell it. It's about understanding your target customer and what values resonate with them. You can show that you can make money by doing something, then people are interested.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Entrepreneurship 101. Just want to give a shout out to everyone on the webcast as well. We're happy that you've joined us. And I have a big announcement about Venture Start. So when you came in, we gave you kind of a cheat sheet about Venture Start. We mentioned Venture Start early on in the program, but now we're going to talk about it in more detail because it's a funding program that you may be eligible for by participating in the Entrepreneurship 101 program. So the eligibility for Venture Start's a program that was just launched this year. It is actually being run by the RIC Center. You saw the logo. The RIC Center is an organization in Mississauga, very much like Mars, works with early stage technology companies. They're running this program, and are asking for clients through our education to it. So eligibility, it need to be a science, technology, engineering, or mathematics graduate, so basically have a degree in those areas. Your business has to be incorporated in South Ontario. If it's not incorporated, yeah, you can easily do that. The total investment sales achieved is less than $100,000, so obviously there's a limit on how big you are. And it provides matching money up to $30,000. So you have to put something in to get the government match. It's a federal program. So say you have $20,000, they will match $20,000, but it's up to $30,000. So there are a number of stages to the program. The first stage is you have to have a Mars advisor. So if you don't have a Mars advisor, you can easily apply for the Mars advisory services. And there's another stage that happens sort of at the same time is you need to have completed some education. So you can see under options, there's a number of different provincial programs that can qualify for the education portion of this program. So you can do the 4 workshop series. We mentioned the workshops last week. 4 of those series qualify for the education portion. Or you can attend 20 Entrepreneurship 101 lectures and do 1 workshop series. So you could do that from what you're doing now. 1 workshop series is 2 or 3 4-hour workshops. Jolt, our incubator program, is also they get funding from the Venture Start program, and there's an online Venture Start education program that you can do as well, but there's a charge of $500, so our education is actually free, and that might be a better option for you. So if you're a Mars client and you are doing or have finished the education, you would apply online and work with your entrepreneur or work with your advisor on a number of things, your business plan, pitch deck, an innovation disclosure form. And there's a couple more hoops you have to go through. You do some documentation and fill out a critical factor assessment, which you have to pay for, $1,200. But again, think of this as an investment into getting $30,000 match. Once you pass the critical factor assessment and your advisors or EIR has approved, you get the first installment of funding, and then you've laid out a plan, you reach those milestones, and you get the second involvement of funding. I know it sounds like a complicated program. Lily Liu actually runs all our workshops and is the Mars contact for Venture Start. So if you have any questions, she's here almost every E101 evening, and she'll stay tonight if you have any questions about it. But basically all you need to know for the beginning part is you need to apply to be a Mars client, and you need to think about which is the education that works best for you, whether it be Entrepreneurship 101 plus 1 workshop series or all 4 of our workshop series. Just to sort of see how many clients we have in the pipeline for this. So it is a Southern Ontario program. So there are a number of regional innovation centers that are putting clients forward for the Venture Start program. From Mars itself, we've had 49 apply. Of those 49, 21 have received the first installment so far, and that they're on their way to getting the second installment when they reach some milestones. 1 is already at the second installment, so this is since March. So that they're the first one through. And a total of $345,000 worth of funding has been given to entrepreneurs. So a little bit about the Entrepreneurs Toolkit workshops. There are brochures that were on the registration table, and we run these workshops all the time. So if you have a need, if you're a Mars client, they're actually free. You pay a $100 deposit, and when you attend all the workshops, you get your $100 back. If you're not a Mars client, or you're outside of the technology space and can't become a Mars client, they are available for $100, which is great value because some of them are 12 hours. So $100 for a 12-hour workshop is a great deal. And actually, Joe, who is our speaker today, was one of the on the founding team of creating the workshop. So you'll see by his presentation style that he's created a great product that I think we've had 100 workshops for 1,000 entrepreneurs in Ontario. So they're tried and tested, these workshops. There's 4 series. Briefly, there's Business Strategy Fundamentals. The first one, actually a lot of Joe's content tonight and on value proposition is also embedded into that workshop series, and they also talk about a business model. Second series is pitching to investors, telling your investment story, pitch deck, and business plan. And then we've got one on building a marketing strategy and one on the B2B sales process. So if you'd like to register for workshops at Mars, again, Lily is our manager of that program, so you can always send her an email or ask her a question if you have, or you can just go directly to the link there, mars-workshops.eventbrite.com, and you can see some of the upcoming ones we have. We have coming up tomorrow, the B2B sales process, so that's a 3-week program. Each week is 4 hours long, and we're launching a new Mars Market Research workshop series. So I think I've seen some of the people in the audience have been at workshop series. This is our new one. If you haven't, if you have any interest in learning how to better do market discovery, that will help you. And also coming up in February is a pitching to investors. And not to be confused with, we are running in January a special session of workshops for those who are interested in the Upstart competition. And we're going to be announcing the Upstart competition next week, so stay tuned. There's more to come on that front too. And here are the contact details. So after that very long explanation about VentureStart, it is my pleasure to get our night started off tonight. We are welcoming Joe Wilson. Joe has done a number of things at Mars. Most recently, he works on the education technology cluster. So he's working with education technology clients. He's also, as I mentioned, has done a number of projects and work for the Mars education team. So he works with entrepreneurs working on innovative ventures in the K-20 and adult education space. He's also a writer. You might have seen his work writing on technology and culture for Now Magazine, The Globe and Mail, Spacing, and Young Street. He is also an entrepreneur. He's the executive director of the Treehouse Group, dedicated to fostering innovation by hosting cross-disciplinary events. So welcome, Joe.
Great, thanks, Carrie. It's good to be back speaking about value prop. This is the 3rd year I've done this talk, and every year I'm thinking, what am I going to say? It's going to be the exact same thing that's online. So I was thinking of coming up and just playing the video and going home. But then I start to think about it, and I realize how much I've learned in a year just by reading and talking and delivering workshops. And there's always new stuff. There's always new books being written and new best practices out there. So there's a bunch of other stuff that I've found that I've kind of integrated in here. And we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I'm just going to, this is what we're going to be doing. I'm going to go heavy on examples. I'm going to talk about value in a kind of, in a meta way, right? To talk about value and values and what we talk about when we mean what we mean when we talk about that in a business sense. And then I stole a few slide decks from the market research workshop that Carrie talked about, and I popped them in there for customer interviews. And then there's a new tool by Alexander Osterwalder that was just released called the Value Proposition Generator, which I'm going to talk about. And that plugs in so nicely to what you're going to be talking about next week, or maybe the week after, the business model with Mark Zimmerman. So these flow a little better than they did in previous years. Carrie was talking about the Entrepreneur's Toolkit and the workshops. These are the workbooks that accompany the workshops. This one, Crafting Your Value Proposition, the new version should be up in the next couple weeks. Yeah. And this is much more aligned to what I'm going to be talking around today and what we do in the workshops. So these are new. So if you want to have a kind of step-by-step, page-by-page, activity-by-activity run-through of some of the content I'm going to be talking about, just download the book. They're free. There's another one called Crafting Your Business Model that comes after this, which will come in handy as well. marsdd.com/toolkit if you want to poke around. Every year when we do surveys at the end of the year, we have people say, you know, it would be great if you had all this stuff online. It is. So don't put that on your survey, okay? Because it annoys Vijender, who runs the site.
Hey, I've got a great idea for a business.
That's exciting. Tell me about it.
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
Huh. That's a little confusing. Can you dumb it down for me?
Sure. What I do is I take a proprietary isomer that I developed with a picric acid wash that hollows out the carbon bonds and replaces them with a nanotube wrapping.
Okay, so I guess it's pretty technical.
Oh yeah. I've been working on this isomer for 9 years.
So what's the business idea?
To sell it,
To who?
everybody will want one,
What for?
so they can wrap their volatile organic compounds in carbon nanotubes.
I think you might need a target customer. I don't think I need to wrap my compounds in your nanotube.
Well, maybe not you.
So, for people who buy it, what's the value you are providing them?
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
You've said that already. This is getting annoying. Why should anyone care about your isomer?
I spent 9 years on this.
I know that. Okay, pretend I'm an investor. How can I make money off your product?
By selling it.
You're a smart guy, but try not to think like a scientist. Think like a business person.
Okay. Value chain. Term sheet.
I have to go now and answer that.
That's not your phone.
I know.
All right. So that's a little video I made a couple years ago based on a lovely gentleman that we met at one of our early workshops. Smart guy, knew his stuff in chemistry. And clearly has something that's making him very excited. He clearly had something, but he was unable to articulate the value of that to everyday people. That's the purpose of the value proposition. It's a one very clear statement that explains the unique benefits of what you've got and for whom. That's it. Another way you can think of it is it's a hypothesis, to kind of still use the science analogy. It's a hypothesis that you've got that you're going to bring and test to the marketplace. You say, I think that these people are going to find value in this product for these reasons. That remains to be seen, right? People do weird things when things pop up in the market, so you need to go and test that. This idea of hypothesis testing will come up again and again in my talk. And you might recognize this from the lean startup movement, right? Which talks a lot about iterations, quick iterations. So you have a little hypothesis, you test it. Did it work? Yes, no, maybe. Try another one. And you continually tweak what you've got. In the same manner, we can tweak our value propositions and get to understand our target customers better and better as we get to know them better and better, and we get to know their problems better and better. Before we get into some examples and some explanation on how to craft it, I just want to preempt these questions, which is always, how is it different from blank? There's a lot of these kind of terms thrown around in terms of communication artifacts that you need to have. So a value proposition is not an elevator pitch, right? An elevator pitch is a fairly casual sounding. It doesn't mean you make it up on the spot. It should be very well practiced, but it's a casual sounding kind of 30-second pitch for somebody you've met for the first time. They say, oh, so what are you working on these days? What do you got? You generally open that with what we would call a hook. I buy dead magazines, or we unthink marketing. Something for them to go, oh, that sounds weird. Tell me more about that weird thing you're doing. You need to hook somebody in and just give them a nice casual explanation. Lots of examples, storytelling. The value proposition is not a tagline, right? It's not something that appears in an ad. It's not marketing copy, right? Those are snappier, shorter. They're generally metaphors for what you're doing. They don't literally describe it. Your value proposition literally describes in very concrete, clear language what it is you're doing and what the value is of that. It's not a mission statement. A mission statement is something that should speak to the kind of blue sky goals of your company. It doesn't say how you do it. It doesn't say what your products are. It doesn't even say who your target customers are. All it says is almost the goals, almost like the ethical goals of your company. U of T is committed to being an internationally significant research university with undergraduate, graduate, and professional programs of excellent quality. Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. It doesn't say how they do that. It doesn't say who their customers are. That's because it's a mission statement that lives in the cloud, no pun intended. The value proposition is a very carefully structured sentence. One sentence, if you can get it. Sometimes you can do two, but try to get it to one. That's the challenge. And it's got three pieces. What is it? What do you got? For whom is it for? What's your target customer? And then what are the values that you're bringing them? Why is it valuable to them? And usually I say list 3 values. And we'll get to values in a moment. So keep this in mind as we continue. And at the end of this, hopefully we'll leave a few minutes, and I want you to try to write one for your own business, or for your own idea. How many people are entrepreneurs who are sitting on an idea that they want to know? Is that all? Yeah, even you. I know some of you have ideas, but you don't think they're good enough. But they are. You just got to work on it. The scientists, how many people are scientists, actually, that got the science? Did anybody understand any words in the science video? Yeah? Nice. Good. Picric acid. The only reason I know what picric acid is, I didn't even know it was a thing, is because there was a leak here at Mars, a picric acid leak, and everybody was freaking out because nobody knew what it was. Everybody was okay, don't worry. One of the things that emerges from the combination of these 3 points, you could call it an emergent property, is that this is unique. It's never been done before. Never before has somebody combined this product for these people with these values. That should be evident. If we can take your value proposition and it can just as easily apply to this company or this company or this company working in the same space, then it's not good enough. It's not specific enough to you and your goals and your product and your offering to the marketplace. And if you're struggling with any of these pieces, then it's time to go back and do more research. So let's just jump right into some examples, and then I'll talk about how this structure. So I picked 3 companies, 3 organizations that people would generally know, winners. The sentence behind me is on their website. I didn't make this one up, but it's not like on the front page because it's pretty wordy. It's in the FAQs as the answer to a question like, how is it that Walmart, or how is it that Winners is able to deliver such value? You know, how can you sell your stuff for so cheap when it's designer clothes? And they answer, Winners is an off-price department store owned by TJX that employs international sourcing and buying power. So that's maybe informative. It doesn't mean much to me. I don't really understand what those things mean unless I'm in the industry. So Winners needs a value proposition that speaks to those 3 dimensions that I talked about. So here's a good value, and full disclosure, I wrote this, so if somebody hears from Winners and is like, that's not what we do, it's my fault. You can come and yell at me later. The way I see it, Winners is a department store that offers fashion-conscious consumers the latest brand names for up to 60% off. So let's dig in even further. There are these 3 components I said every value proposition needs to have. What is it, for whom, and values. So what is it? In red, it's a department store. For whom, in orange, fashion-conscious consumers. Values, there's 3 here, 2. Latest brand names, so that's kind of your status and your brand equity, up to 60% off. So you've got an economic value in there, you're saving money. So those are the 2 specific values that they have decided resonate with that target market. And once you've got a fit between those things, then you've got a value proposition that will make sense in a market. So this is our friend with the chemical isomer. We've discovered a chemical isomer additive that allows for a reduction of VOC emissions, and he would go on, carbon nanotubes. I don't think he name-checked picric acid. I think I put that in there. But so this was the third of 3 workshops, and he still was using this language. And it was in the third workshop, and he was getting really frustrated with us. And we asked him something like, how do you explain this to your grandmother? Or how do you explain this? Do you have kids? Do you have little kids? How do you explain to them what you've done at work? And it turns out that this isomer that he discovered, it exists in liquid form, and you put a few drops of it into paint when you're manufacturing paint, and it makes it safer, right? It lowers the emissions, the harmful emissions. And we were like, that's amazing. What a great product. Why didn't you say that before? And he would say, I did say that. I kept telling you that we've discovered a chemical isomer additive that allows for a reduction of blah, 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 blah. So all it is a translation game, right? So this is the value proposition that we wrote with him. Let's put the 3 components right on there. A1 Industries has developed an economical, easy-to-use chemical additive that allows paint manufacturing companies to reduce the environmental impact of their products. So what is it? In red, it's a chemical additive. We might even put liquid chemical additive in there so people know that you can squeeze it in drops or store it in a bottle or something. For whom? Paint manufacturing companies, nice and specific, your target market. And values, it's economical, it's easy to use, and it reduces environmental impact. So those are 3 values that hopefully resonate with paint manufacturing companies. Now, he was very eager to tell us that this chemical isomer cannot just be used for paint. You can use it in any sort of manufacturing molding process. So plastic chairs, he's like, I could do that to plastic chairs. And we kind of had this thing where, could you do it with this microphone? Could you do it with this plastic bottle? And he's like, yes, yes, yes. The big mistake is he said he wanted to go out and sell it to everybody all at once, right? He needs a distinct value proposition for every single target market. So we could take out paint manufacturing companies and put in plastic chair manufacturing companies. But the trick, though, is that if you change your target market, they might have different values. Right? They have different things that they value. Google. What I've listed here is Google's business model, essentially. This is how they do the Google. And by Google, I mean the search engine Google, right? Not like the giant behemoth that does everything. This is the search engine. So Google uses a patented page ranking algorithm to make money through ad placement. Okay, that's how they make money. But what's the value of that? Why should anybody care? Google is the world's largest search engine that allows internet users to find relevant information quickly and easily. What is it? It's a search engine. For whom? Internet users. Values, relevance, speed, ease of use. This begs a question that we don't have tons of time to get into, but I'll mention it and I'll give you some ideas to look it up later. The question is, are the internet users really Google's customers? They're what we would call the end users of the product, but they're not actually the customers. Who are Google's customers? The ads, the advertisers, exactly. So if they are our target customers, we need a value proposition for them as well. Google is the world's largest search engine that automatically provides advertisers with potential customers tailored to the ad content, increasing click-through rates and conversion rates. So what is it? It's still a search engine. For whom? It's for advertisers. That brings them what value? It automates a process. It's tailored. It increases click-through rates and conversion rates. Does that make sense? I've used this word like 1,000 times already, but it begs the question, what do you actually mean by a value? The first thing to say, and the first thing is, this is the rule you got to keep in your back pocket. Values are not features. They're not tech features. You know, if my iPhone can do like 3 cool things, those aren't values. It's only a value if it makes your life better in some way. So values are things like saving time, saving money, enabling you to do something that you couldn't do before, convenience, quality, customizability, usability, lowering risk, your health, aesthetics, status, newness, environmental, ethical, social inclusion, self-actualization. I'll talk about that one in a little bit. These are values. When people talk about what do you value, you know, you value time with your family, you value your health, you value being satisfied at your job. Those are values. So let me explain the taxonomy here and give you just a few examples. Generally, I've arranged this so that the values that are on the right-hand side of this slide are values that we would use in B2B value propositions when you are selling to a business. These ones are kind of more rational, more measurable. They usually have a bottom line that you can quantify in numbers. On the left, these are generally ones that you use to sell directly to customers, so B2C. Let me just fly through some examples, explain what I mean by these. But there are more than this, right? These are just kind of when I was brainstorming, ones I came up with. Lower risk. So that's a value that you bring to people. One of the ways people lower risk is by offering a guarantee. All right, it takes away the risk factor of trying a new product you haven't seen before. And that's valuable to people. They will pay for that. Saving time, right? We've got the Ford assembly line here. It used to take days, if not weeks, to make a car. He got these off the assembly line 1 every 24 seconds. That's a value that he could note in his ledger books quantitatively. Saving or making money. This is kind of the big obvious one, right? Is it better for my bottom line? Then I'm interested. If it's not, I'm not interested. This is a nice little chart. I took this from the Interface Carpets website. Anybody heard of Interface? They're a carpet company who have done amazing work around sustainability. Not just like putting little green tags on their carpets and saying they're green, but they have reinvented the whole process of making carpets from the ground up. And I really like this. This is, by the way, is just a pie chart showing what kind of energy they use, right? Mostly natural gas, then renewable, then a tiny bit of propane and what they call brown electricity, oil-based. But the reason I like this is because nobody was really interested in the kind of green stuff they were doing until he published a paper, the CEO published a paper, showing exactly how much money they saved by being more efficient. So the bottom line with a lot of businesses, well, with all businesses really, is the money. Is the money you're saving or the money you're making? And as soon as you can show that you can make money by doing something, then people are interested. The enabling function. So enabling people in their business is as a value of yours. So let me explain these images here. Of course, it's a Rolls-Royce decal from a car, but they also make planes, plane engines. And one of the things I love about Rolls-Royce and what they do is their business model is set up such that they don't only get paid when they're working on fixing an engine. They get paid for every second that that plane is flying and functioning. And if you think about it, it makes sense because they're saying, look, we did such a good job on this, right? We want to incentivize the whole system to keep those planes in the air. Otherwise, it's in Rolls-Royce's best interest to just fix it forever. But they want to say, no, we're enabling you to make money, so let's share in the profits of a flying plane, because that's essentially what we both want. Convenience. This is a big value for people. All I did yesterday when I was putting this together is, that's Mars in the center there, the little orange dot. And all I did was type into Google Maps Tim Hortons. And this is how many Tim Hortons there are within a 2-minute walk of Mars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 9 Tim Hortons within a 2-minute walk of Mars. One is literally like 20 steps away. But that's a key part of their value proposition, is convenience. In fact, we've got a company up in Jolt, the accelerator upstairs, who has built their entire business model around a car sharing system that the pickup and drop-off points are Tim Hortons all across Canada. So it was like this infrastructure that was just given to him. It's great. So convenience is something that is very important to a certain target customer. If you're one of those people who has really high coffee standards and must go to this certain fancy coffee shop in the West End every day, you're a different target customer group than I am. Your target customer group has different values in terms of you're probably much more, you value the perhaps service and the quality of the coffee much more than I do. I just want something hot to drink in the morning to get me to work. So it's about understanding your target customer and what values resonate with them. Quality. After the coffee thing, I was thinking, well, what do I spend money on? What do I value as quality? I don't have a car. I don't spend tons of money on clothes. Like, what do I spend money on? One thing that I will pay more for is whiskey, is Scotch whiskey, because it's one of the few things that the higher the quality is, that you can tell that it's better, right? So in your life, you kind of play the role of different target customers depending on what it is. And your job as an entrepreneur is to figure out your target customers and what they value. Customizability. It might seem trivial, but the fact that you can customize your desktop in Windows is a huge selling point, right? This wasn't very common, beforehand, but before the Apple, and it's something that we take for granted now in all our gadgets that that we're able to customize them. So it's a value. So these B2B ones we were just talking about are often rational. They're often what we call overt values. You can talk about them very easily and say, no, I need to make money. I need to meet my quotas. It's too risky for me. If you can give me a 30-day money-back guarantee, then I'm interested. So on the other side, though, when we're talking about selling to customers, we can talk about different kinds of values. We can talk about usability, right? How easy is it to use? Everybody, the iPad's so easy to use, a 2-year-old can use it, True. But think even simpler technology. Think about a book, right? In information science, they look at how many degrees of separation you are from starting something to the end goal. And in a book, you're 1 degree away. You just go like that, and then you're interacting with the content. Now, you need to know how to read and the particular language and the conventions of reading, that's true. But physically, you only have to do one thing. Even with the iPhone, something that's supposed to be, very user-friendly, and comparatively it is. There's still lots of buttons to press, and my wife, who doesn't have a cell phone at all, she gets really annoyed at the iPhone because it's so complicated. So don't give it the iPhone test, give it the book test, right? If your product is as easy to use as a book, you'll be all right. Health as a value. Aesthetics as a value. These were blown glass from, I was in Venice 3 years ago. And these have no value except for their aesthetics. Right? There's no other reason that you'd have one except that you think it looks good. It doesn't help me make money. It doesn't help me do any of those other things we were talking about before. In fact, it increases the risk because I feel like I'm going to break it just by looking at it. Status is another important piece, and the Venetian glass could squeak into this category too. Anybody know what that bag is there? Who that bag is by? Prada? No? Yeah, Louis Vuitton, LV. That brown on brown is kind of like their look, right? It doesn't even need a logo, right? People who know just know, right? Oh, that's a Louis Vuitton. And you see somebody and they're like, oh, that guy, yeah, Louis Vuitton. If it's real, exactly right, yeah. Probably 95% of them are not, right? But especially in Venice, right, where they sell those things. That's true. But the reason it's such a healthy knockoff market is because people do buy them for the status of that bag. And the reason that Louis Vuitton gets so annoyed is because the more of these hit the streets, the lower that relative value of status becomes, right? the status currency that they're passing out with that becomes devalued when there's more of them on the street. Newness. The iPad, which is in a Louis Vuitton iPad case, you might notice. There's all those people who just line up for the new iPhone or line up for the new iPad. I haven't even used it yet. They don't know what it's good for. They don't know if it works. But just because it's new and they're part of that tribe that values new stuff. Self-actualization. That value that people just like to get better at things, no matter what it is. It's not in this person's economic self-interest to sit at home on a Thursday night and practice the oboe. Well, unless he's like a professional oboe player, I suppose. But people rehearse things, they collect things, they become experts at things where it only enhances their own inner feeling of self. And that's a value. Environmental values. This is the bamboo bike, right? Hybrid cars, things like this. You can charge more if you include that value of environmentalism. An ethical dimension of value, fair trade coffee, 10,000 villages. There's lots of examples of the kind of ethical dimension people will pay for. Social inclusion, the fear of getting left out, right? If you can include in your value proposition, connect easily with your friends and influencers, it's a very powerful value you can bring. These values are more emotional, they're less rational, and they're often latent. People don't know why they want to get on Facebook, but they just know they have to, right? They can't miss it, whatever it is. So the process of drafting a value proposition is to first make an assumption about what those three components is. I think that my business will produce this for these people with these values. And then you've got to test it somehow. This comes from Steve Blank's 4 Steps to Epiphany, and he just earlier this year released a great new book, I should have brought it down, called The Startup Owner's Manual. It's a huge tome of a book, but it is the encyclopedia of all things Steve Blank and Lean Startup. And if you're ever looking for frameworks, activities to do, he's just the guru of startups. So it's a great purchase. But what he talks about is, state your hypothesis, go out and test it, and once you've done some testing, come back and look at what you've got. If they have confirmed your initial hypothesis, keep going on to the next step. Maybe start to make your actual product. If they haven't confirmed your value proposition, then there's something wrong. Either you haven't nailed the problem that they've had, or you're not articulating it right, or maybe you're trying to sell fancy coffee to Tim Hortons customers, right? Maybe there isn't a match there. So how do we test? Well, we go out and we talk to customers. There's tons of what we would call primary market research that you can do. Pretending to be the customer interviews, lead users, quality function deployment, all of this stuff, some of them are kind of professional subcategories, but I'm going to talk about some of the stuff you can do yourself. This is what you can do yourself, is don't just sit there and keep coding, hoping that you're building a better project or product, because you don't know if you are. You only know if you're building a better product if other people tell you you are. Or not even tell you, but you can see it. If they start to use it and they start to get hooked in and engaged, then you know that you're on the right track. So here are a bunch of stuff you can do on your own. Interviews, focus groups, surveys, participant observation, so that's where you join them in interacting with it. And then observation, which is like, you're like an anthropologist hiding behind the curtains watching how they interact with your product, right? Kind of creepy, but effective. So there's 2 kinds of interviews that you can do. And this is taken from Ash Mariah's Running Lean. What I'll do is I'll add that to the slides. I'll add the slides before we put them up on
all those books are on the back of their calendar.
Oh, they are. Oh, great. Good. So Running Lean, it talks about the kind of interviews that you can do. And he has this whole script that you can use. And it's like 2 minutes, welcome. 2 minutes, collect demographic information, tell a story, Ask them to rank the problems they experience. Explore customers' worldview, wrap up, thank them for their time. So it's a very useful book in the very specifics. And he even includes examples, like make a sheet like this. At the top it's got all the contact information of the person you're interviewing. And then he's identified some problems. This is his hypothesis. As somebody who shares photos online, my assumption is that you have problems with this, this, and this, right? You don't have time to do it. You're annoyed with all the different platforms. And there's a lot of external demand for the content I can't keep up with, blah, blah, blah. So do you have these problems? How severe is it? What would you pay to get rid of that problem? The question is, what do you do with that, and how do you build that back into your value proposition? The first thing is that you can analyze it quantitatively. How many people? How did they rank it? What did it look like? Infographics are very sexy for presentations. The other thing you can do is look at it qualitatively. Listen very carefully to the words people use, right? If somebody says something like this, there's nothing more important to me than sharing memories with my family. They're telling you exactly what their values are, literally. So in your value proposition, use those words, sharing memories with your family. That's a value that they are telling you that they'll pay for. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to post photos and videos to like 3 different platforms every week because my uncle doesn't understand how to use Dropbox. They're telling you very clearly what their problem is, and if you can solve it, good chance that this person will pay you to solve that problem. Now, one person doesn't make a difference, but if you've got 30 or 40 or 50 people who say around the same thing, then you've got good validation that your hypothesis and that you're able to solve that problem. You can go on to the next step, which is to start to put together something. The last piece is just, and this is from Bitstrips, a Mars client. Anybody know Bitstrips? Anybody have kids that use Bitstrips at school? The point here is that don't just listen to what people say, and watch how they behave. When people lean forward and use their hands, there's relative emotional weight we can give to different words. And if you're transcribing an interview, this is the stuff that gets missed. But you learn a lot. So do these face-to-face. Don't get on the phone. Well, you can, but it's better to do them face-to-face. Right? Really understand what people mean, not just what they say. When you've done all this, you can put together what we might call a day-in-the-life scenario. So this is Ernie. He's an aircraft mechanic. And we can do what we might call a before and after scenario, where we describe Ernie's current situation and where he wants to get to. So we can say something like, Ernie is an aircraft mechanic. He's got a plane here, but he's got a problem he's never encountered before. And if he can't fix this plane, it's going to cost the airline money, and it's going to annoy the customers because they're sitting on the runway not going anywhere. So those are the consequences. So after Ernie is given an e-reader that your company has developed that has preloaded on it all the manuals for all the airplanes that have ever been invented. And all he has to do is look it up. He doesn't have to go all the way up to his office and look through a filing cabinet. So we get him that information faster, it's reliable, and as a result, the new outcomes are that the plane leaves on time, the company saves money, the customers are happy, and I would add that Ernie is like the man now. The boss noticed that, right? And the boss rewards Ernie, whether or not with economic rewards, but with social praise, calling him out at the Christmas party or at the next general meeting. The second kind of research you can do is secondary market research. And this is basically just a plug for the Mars Market Intelligence researchers upstairs on the 4th floor. What they do is they aggregate data from all these big market research firms, Gardner, Frost & Sullivan, Forrester, and they make it available to you guys. It's free for entrepreneurs. So sign up as a Mars client. You can ask them questions, and they will answer them. And this is great for investor presentations to show you've done your homework. You know how big the market size is. You know demographic information of your target customer. Last week, John Warren talked a bit about some of these principles. And specifically, he showed you this map, right? This canvas. So this is the business model canvas by Alex Osterwalder. And next week, Mark Zimmerman's going to take you through this in greater detail. But right now, I just want to point out that the center of that business model canvas is the value proposition. You can't design a business model if you don't have the heart of value. That sounds like an album title or something. The value proposition is the core of it. So I want to talk a little about how another tool that Osterwalder has developed to get it. He calls this the value proposition designer. And it works into the value proposition. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to connect the value. Is there a laser pointer on this? No, there isn't. He's trying to connect the value, that little green gift, and he's trying to connect it with a certain customer segment, a certain person who has a certain set of problems. So he says, let's start on the customer target side. He said, let's list at the back here all the things that that customer wants to do. Ernie wants to fix planes. He wants to impress his boss. He wants to get home on time. All the things that are priorities in Ernie's life. But then, what obstacles does he come across? What frustrations does he have? Right? What other people are getting in his way to achieving those goals? And then what gains might he get if he can solve those problems? Right? So this is like, in another version of Osterwalder's thing, he calls it the customer empathy map. And I love that term because it's really about empathizing with your customers. Don't assume you know what they like or what they are like. You know, you got to go and kind of live and breathe with them. Read what they read. Watch the TV they watch. And then you'll get exactly who they are and what they need. So on the value side, what kind of products and services then do you have that are in your value proposition? So this is the what. What is it that you have? And how are you relieving Ernie's pain? Right? What are you doing to alleviate that pain? And then what are the consequences of that? What are the gains that come out of that? You know, both for Ernie, but also for the business and the whole technology. This value proposition designer, and it's got, you'll notice that they've got little questions in each kind of quadrant. No, not quadrant. Triant. Is that a word? That will prod you to writing down your own thoughts. This is available at that web address right there, and you probably can't read it, so it will be up on SlideShare. Right? When this is posted at the end of the week, you'll just be able to follow it right through. Or if you just Google Value Proposition Designer, it'll pop right up. But it's a great little tool. I would encourage you to try it. Again, when you have a value proposition that you think is that people understand, they agree with you that, yes, I have that problem, I would like you to solve it, and yes, those values resonate with me, I'll pay you to solve that problem, if you can bring me those values, we need to test it again, right? We need to go out and test it. Any of these testing, procedures, they generally lead to three different things. Either, yes, validated, that's exact, you've hit it right on, I will pay you for that. Do you have one right now with you? Because I want to buy one from you right now. Right? That's the best kind of confirmation you can get. And you usually have to say, no, I haven't actually built them yet. I'm just testing my idea. Number two is when they say, yeah, that's a problem for me, but you know what really annoys me? Right? So you haven't quite got the problem that you're solving right. You haven't quite nailed it. Or you list some values and they say, you know what would be really great is if you could make it customizable. That would be really useful for me. And then the third one is they look at you blankly and say, this might seem like a cool idea to you, but that problem's not very interesting to me. I don't need what you're selling. And if you hear that a number of times, you can stop. I know they talk about grit and determination and perseverance as an entrepreneur, but listening to your customers is also a good idea. The idea with your first launch is not to launch the whole thing. Right? You don't want to test the whole thing. It's too overwhelming for people. You need to control some variables. So what you want to do then is once you've tested your value proposition is just to test the minimum viable product. The minimum viable product, again, this is a term from Eric Ries in the Lean Startup, is basically a minimum set of features that allows you to get feedback. So if you're designing a website, you could just make a mock-up. Right? It doesn't actually do anything. Right? Just make a mock-up in Illustrator. and bring it to them and say, what do you think about this? Where would you click? What would you want to see along the top row? So you've got a physical prototype to show them, something, a prototype that makes sense to them. And this way you get more feedback, and you can tweak your value proposition yet again. Just to wrap up here, I'll talk about where you want to go with your company, which is, of course, to start with your minimum viable product and end up with what we would call a whole product, which is the product with the complete set of features, with all the training manuals, with all of the websites that have popped up in support of it, all the auxiliary material that you need, all the plugins, all of that stuff, so that you're an established part of the market now. But to get there isn't a straight line. We need to get from minimum viable to whole product in iterations with these little tests, right? So you need to test your value. And those iterations look like that. They look like Steve Blank's testing concept. So I'll leave it here. And while people are kind of asking questions and stuff, I would really encourage you, take a first crack, write your value proposition. Right? These are the 3 things it needs. And once you've finished writing it, test it, and then do it again. And then when you've satisfied you've got that sentence nice and clear, then prototype something and test that. And that way you have a good understanding of the value of your customers. Thank you.
So, thanks, Joe. Joe's value proposition lecture was actually voted one of the most useful lectures. I think it was in the top 2 or 3 for that last year. And I think a lot of people overlook the value proposition because they think it's really simple, but it's such an important input into your strategy and definitely into your marketing. So we would definitely encourage you to actively write your value proposition, as Joe suggested. A couple questions from the webcast. The first one, is value proposition the same as the benefit to the customer?
Yes.
Yeah. And another one is, could cognitive skills be a value? When you were
Say that again, cognitive skills?
Cognitive skills, yeah.
I need to know in what context, but certainly.
Let's say like the e-learning or the software that people are building to help people's memory, something like that maybe?
So absolutely. Did everybody hear the question over there? So are cognitive skills, like enhancing cognitive skills, is that a value? I would say certainly. A lot of the work I do with ed tech and education entrepreneurs, one of the values they claim is that it makes kids learn. It makes adults learn. It increases the cognitive capacity of seniors, for instance. And those are enormous values related to health and well-being. But with enormous claims comes the enormous burden of proof, right? So claiming things like that need to be backed up by, we've done clinical trials, we know this is how we tested it. That's a hypothesis that needs to be rigorously tested, because you're really, that's a bold claim. Yeah.
Hi, Joe. I have a question specifically regarding the test. So I see you can use your self-resources to come up with value proposition, but I always find out the test is most difficult to me when I start a startup. Especially you try to target on the niche market and try to reach them, and then sometimes not the results you're looking for. So I was wondering, is that possible you can use like secondary market research or other ways to test your hypothesis, or it has to be primary research?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So yes, definitely. Secondary market research is always a good basis for everybody. I would argue that everybody needs to get out and talk face-to-face with their actual customers, though, because there's nuances hidden in large numbers. And the more niche your market, the more you do need to reach out to them directly. But secondary market research gives you the global perspective. And I think you're not alone in that the testing of it is the toughest part. But when you get answers that you're not expecting, that's a good thing, because that means you're learning. And it's a good thing because it tells you that if you had put $1 million into your original idea, you wouldn't have made the money back. right? Because your customers were like, yeah, no, that's not quite right. You know what I mean? So think of those as learning opportunities, and then going back and saying, how can we tweak that to match what they really want?
And
Does that answer your question?
I think some people make out primary market research to be more complicated than it is. Like, think about it when you're going to look for a job. You would go for informational interviews with different people at different companies to learn about the jobs, the culture. You just go out on kind of like an investigative mission if you're really serious about your job search. So think about that as well, where you reach out to contacts in the industry, your target customer, and you're not selling to them. You're just having a conversation to make sure that the problem that you're solving is something that they actually have and that your solution might apply to that problem. So just start with something. It doesn't have to be, paid focus groups and all kinds of things at first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How's it going? Great talk. It seems implicit in kind of the talk that if you are unable to articulate uniqueness in your value proposition, that your company is going to fail. But I would point to companies like Living Social and Groupon, who I can't differentiate.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, and I already think I know my answer is, but I want to know your answer is it possible to be a company that's cash flow positive and who kind of fails on that uniqueness spectrum?
I would say certainly.
Right.
I read a really funny blog the other day from, I can't remember who it was, and he was ranting. He's like, I'm never going to use the word innovation again. He's like, innovation is overrated. He's like, find a company who's doing something really cool, copy it, and make your money that way. So yes, it's definitely possible. I mean, and you see that happen, right? There's just clumps of startups that pop up, and they're virtually interchangeable. When we talk about designing a value proposition that creates value, and one that is an industry leader and is an exponential growth company, that's when we need something unique and new and disruptive. It's certainly possible to just find a repeatable business model, but those aren't the kinds of companies we're most interested in at Mars. We're interested in people who have either, or both would be the best, innovative product that's new and useful, and an innovative business model. So not only do you have something cool, you've figured out a really cool way to sell it. Yeah, so there's plenty of other kinds of businesses, but they're just not maybe necessarily the ones we're interested in. That's a really good point, though.
Joe, a question from Larry on the webcast. As a matter of curiosity, did the mad scientist eventually get his product into the marketplace? Did
Yes,
he fix his...
he did. Internet. He did get it up and out, and he's doing quite well at it now.
Does he know about your video?
That's a good question. I don't think he does.
He does now.
Don't tell him. Don't tell him.
And we'll take one more webcast and one more live question. The last webcast question is from Ruben. Does the value have to be quantifiable?
That's a great question. No, it doesn't. If you're dealing in B2B sales, you should have one value that is quantifiable. And if you can be specific, that's great. Like winner's 60% price cut. But certainly for things going direct to consumers, you don't need it, and you shouldn't have it quantifiable. So it doesn't have to be. There's a lot of things up there that you can't really quantify. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation, Joe. So I find the way of testing the minimal viable product very useful when it comes to concrete services and products. But what if it has to be applied to a set of a set of practices? Mm-hmm. Right? How can you minimize how do you minimize how it's supposed to be sold without really making your customer feel like it's a bunch of nonsense, because you're not really revealing as much as you need to when it comes to a set of practices.
Right. So is the question really, how do you prototype something that's not a physical product?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yes.
Next week we have the product development lecture.
There you
so
go.
That's a good question for next week with
Okay.
Steve Karkner, has developed products for RIM.
Yeah. Do you know IDEO, the design firm in California?
Never heard
So
of
just Google IDEO, IDEO, and they do a lot of great work on prototyping.
Okay.
And they've taken this idea of prototyping and they apply it to consulting companies, to event planners, to all kinds of non-product stuff. And so that's really interesting reading. But you can show examples of, you can give them a quote, you can give them like a schedule of the day if it's a workshop, you can give them examples of the kinds of problems you've solved in the past, right? And say, is this the kind of problems that resonate with you?
Like
Does that help?
when people prototype websites, they just show pictures. They just do wireframes. So there are ways of doing it without actually building.
Okay. All right.
I'm just conscious that we're running over time, so I'll just ask that the last question come to Joe after the session ends. We'll put you first in line. And I just wanted to thank Joe very much for your great presentation tonight.
Thanks, guys.